To take home the Golden Gloves, you've got to put in the work, and you've got to be tough as nails. Ashley Kalis was driven to achieve. Today, Kalis is still fueled by that same hope, grit, and determination. A mother of 3 school-aged boys and successful business owner who ran testing and vaccination sites across the state. Kalis is the fighter Rhode Island needs right now because it's time for a change. Ashley Kalis for governor.
Good evening. Welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those new to the show, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today is Mr. Assad Zamir. He is the former Minister of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock of Afghanistan, and currently runs a humanitarian foundation, and we'll speak more about that in a little bit. The humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan following Taliban's rise and takeover of the country has been one of the most overlooked stories in the Western press. There's been some stories about human rights abuses that have been taking place under the Taliban rule, but the cold, hungry winter that has affected millions of people has seen few reports outside several major humanitarian organizations. And this is a story that needs to be told, it needs to be highlighted, and most importantly, the solutions towards direct assistance to the affected people of Afghanistan. That is something that needs to be discussed at much greater length and depth than what's been taking place in the corridors of Washington thus far. And this is why we're here today, to get a sense of the situation facing Afghanistan, to get a sense of where it was before and what challenges it's facing now, and whether it's possible to overcome them. Thank you so much for joining us today. And before we get into this substantive topic, I just wanted to discuss a little bit about your tenure as a minister, about the portfolios that fell under that role. You were also the youngest minister in Afghanistan, and what was that like?
Thank you, Rena. It's very nice to be here talking to you about very important situation that's going on. I mean, in the world, but for me, very important knowing what's happening in Afghanistan. I was in my previous job when I was a Minister of Agriculture from early 2015 to late 2017, so almost for 3 years, during which I was looking at responsible for 3 broad areas, and that is the backbone of Afghan economy: the agriculture, the livestock, and the irrigation. Almost 70% of Afghan population are directly and indirectly engage in agriculture, and that create the biggest contribution of the GDP come from agriculture. Of course, the illicit crop. Um, so while being the youngest minister, the same time it was the most important sector to feed people, and most importantly to create sustainable jobs. We're heavily dependent on foreign aid. We need that to be to dependent less as we move on and become food secure. So that was one of some of my responsibilities during that period of time. I would be happy to discuss further if there was any interest in any particular area.
Sure, I just wanted to get a little bit more of a sense. What exactly was the nature of agriculture? What type of livestock was being grown and cultivated, and what were the areas that were the most sensitive in that sense, that required the most attention?
We had a lot of subsistence farmers. We have a majority of Afghan are engaged, so they don't have big own big lands. So it's small subsistence farmers, not using basic agriculture technology. And that also means not being very effective and efficient and productive in terms of land utilization and water resource management. So the major crops are grains, various grains that we were producing, but though to go back in the 60s, Afghanistan was a major exporter of many products in the world. Over 40% of the world grapes were coming from Afghanistan, and so many other horticulture crops. But due to the war, a lot of the agriculture infrastructure were destroyed. So one of my responsibility was to rehabilitate those infrastructure to take back Afghanistan to the area pre-war, to be able to be self-sufficient and food secure. So great, and the area that Afghanistan was exporting, got some momentum in the past 8 or 10 years was again horticulture. We were exporting various horticulture from grapes, pomegranate. Afghanistan has one of the best pomegranates in the world. Raisins, steel raisin was a major crop was exported in the region and beyond. And slowly some of the Afghan traders have found their way to Europe. Afghanistan saffron, for example, was another crop that for the past 5 or 6 years consecutively has been winning the best quality in the world award. Though lesser in terms of production from neighboring Iran country, but we were better in terms of quality. So there were many products that slowly the world consumers were noticing is coming from Afghanistan. Previously, it was exported under our neighboring country's name, whether it was Pakistan, whether it's Iran, or whether it's other country, were putting their labors on Afghan product. But slowly, as our traders were able to access different markets, so horticulture was slowly regaining its name in terms of quality, in terms of taste, and it's still one of the because of the different valley we have, the agroclimatical region, that's why the quality of fruits are very good in Afghanistan.
Indeed, that's a very interesting point you're making, because most people think of Afghanistan as a very difficult terrain, mountainous. They think more of mining and things like that than of agriculture. But it sounds like the products that were cultivated were needed, they were diverse, and they had a lot of demand abroad.
Absolutely. I mean, to give you 2 more examples, that's absolutely true that it's a mountainous country, but at the same time, those mountains offer a lot of product. For example, we have mountains of pine nuts tree and wild pistachio. These are all widely grown. and Afghanistan export hundreds of $1 million, well, to Pakistan, to China, to other part of the world. Part of it is named exported under Afghanistan name, part is exported under Pakistan's name. So we do have a lot of agriculture activity and product. Is still horticulture one of the biggest, contributing almost over in the past pre 2021. If I give you some figure, to close to 800 or 900 million export from the horticulture was coming. It still was at the beginning. So as I mentioned, Afghanistan traders were finding their consumers in connection with other parts of the world. If that continue for another 5 years or a decade, that number would have been double or triple. So the potential is there. Although the potential is there, there is a lot of post-harvest losses. So with the improved agriculture practices, those losses would have further contribute toward the farmers' gain or income or the country's GDP.
You mentioned that at the time the mechanisms for farming, that the technology was very primitive and not modernized and made it difficult to be efficient. What measures were necessary and what measures were you taking to change that?
A number of two measures were taken. Just to give you a few as an example. Introducing improved seeds, improving better agriculture practices, better water saving techniques like drip irrigation, for example. Post-harvest storages to keep the post-harvest losses reduced, and also agri-food processing centers. To give you a couple of examples of the pomegranate juice. The Afghanistan pomegranate juice is exported. It started with that within Afghanistan, but exported very largely to UK and Europe. And the one person I was talking to him last year, it was in discussion with one of the biggest pomegranate processing or juice company in US to export to US. So there were some advancement in different areas, from improved agriculture practices to technology to agro processing. However, we need to do more in those introduction, educating farmers and convincing farmers to adopt it nationwide would have taken some time, but we were successful as a model, as an introductory test with a number of regions in Afghanistan to introduce, and farmers were slowly copying those from each other.
Now, I may ask what may sound like a very strange question, but I'm genuinely curious. One of the challenges for Afghanistan has always been opium growth and drugs and so forth. From an agricultural perspective, was it in any way a challenge to the farmers? Was there did the growth of the opiates present a challenge to the land, the use of resources, and also to farmers themselves?
It is true. It's still true that over 90, or to be close to exact, is over 95% of the opium of the world is coming from Afghanistan. And in order to compete or convince farmers to switch from that opium production to illicit crops, and we had a number of crops that we could offer. Like, to give you an example of saffron, would have been make more money for the farmers. Horticulture, pistachio, different fruits would have made more. It's not the farmers who make the most benefit in the opium production. The farmers make a very small amount, which they barely survive on it. It is the middleman and beyond the network that is actually making the most out of it. One thing that is important in order to fight and convince farmers to stop producing opium, we have to study the network, the system that is used for opium production. The model that is used there is a very comprehensive, and a lot of investment has been done. For example, the farmers are given advances, and they are giving advances that their crops will be bought at the time of the harvest. So the farmer has assurance, and they are giving support during that harvest, and and a lot of money out there. So on the other hand, while there were other commodities that could replace them, neither the government nor the international community had that capacity or pledged the resources to convince the farmers or to make commitment to the farmers that they will buy their harvest. So the farmers were not sure if they produce other crops, will they be able to sell it? And most importantly, will the government give them some cash in advance to be able to feed their family while they are waiting to harvest their crops. So those were some of the challenges, although there were a number of success stories that some areas were able to stop opium cultivation, but the continuation of support once stopped it, because there were some activities, some projects for them that we did. But once that support was stopped, because these activities were project-based, donor-based, and after 6 months or 1 year intervention, then it stopped, and the farmer were saying that, okay, both the donors and the government were just helping me for 1 year, and after 1 year, they are gone. So they were switching back. So they did not see that commitment for long enough. So in order to reduce the opium cultivation, there need to be for a sustained long-term program to help the farmer, to gain the farmer trust, that the program is there for a number of years till they are able to stand on their feet, to be able to feed their family, and they will not leave them in the middle to go back to the opium cultivation.
And who were generally the donors for such projects? Were they local, private philanthropists? Were they outsiders from foreign investors? Who was generally involved in that?
In the opium production or in the illicit?
Yeah, the projects that help support the farmer.
Oh, the project support were usually donor supported. There were all kinds of donors from US, like the INL was there, the International Counter Narcotics Force, from World Bank, from the UN, from all that donors. They had some engagement in the eradication of poppy. Sometimes it was very intensive, and sometimes it was slow. It was based on the volume of production and the politics in their capital that they were reacting, rather than on actual strategy to eradicate the poppy.
And was that strategy ever fully developed?
There were not one I would say single approach. There were different understanding and different measures, while there were a lot of efforts, uncoordinated one between even donors community. Mm-hmm. So as and we had a Ministry of Counter Narcotic established for this purpose to address this issue, while there were also issues within the government and the capacity of the individuals, as whether the ministers or deputy or other senior government, to be able to bring all those donors under one table and have a synergy in the strategy that they all had to play in order to have a very impactful result. So that was also lacking within the government and in terms of the strategy, as well as within the donor community in terms of lack of coordination and cooperation.
Well, it sounds like the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Counter Narcotics were kind of facing the same issue from different perspectives. But was there ever security implications to this economic effort to change the basis for the economy from narcotics based to regular agriculture? Were there the middlemen and all these networks have they ever tried to disrupt these efforts?
Absolutely, they were very powerful in groups, mafia or individuals. They were very strong, resourceful, fully weapon. I mean, and they had a lot of people. They were fighting under different name, under the against government, but their main agenda was to keep that area insecure in order to be able to cultivate poppy. And even within the government, I would say there were a number of people that had stake in that one, particularly in the security sector, that they didn't want that area to be fully under the control of the government. So there were a lot of players within and outside of the government, and those that connected with the region and beyond, that were creating insecurity and fighting against the government forces and international forces in order to keep that area out of their reach.
And I'm guessing this kind of all played into Taliban's hands later on, this sort of arrangement, and the fact that there was this tense relationship between government and some of these factions and self-interested parties.
I mean, yeah, I absolutely agree that. I mean, what I would say is that while the agenda of a number of international partners were different, or even if the agenda was the same, the strategy was different. Then the issue was also within the different players in the security sector and the government, that they were not able to come together along to be able to fight against a very organized, a very well-financed and groups that was not confined to Afghanistan, but to the region and to the globally. They had a network of that one. So that was not just the fight for Afghan to be able to fight that one in order to show some result.
Now, to fill in the gap between your time in office and the events taking place now, what happened in the years that after you left office, leading up to last year's takeover of the country?
One thing, if we refer to some of the reports of the World Bank during the time, and World Bank was producing annual economic reports of the country every year. In 2015, they reported that Afghanistan had the economic growth of Afghanistan was 2.3% or 4%, and that was mainly due to agriculture growth. Similarly, that was reported in 2016 and 17. So there was a significant contribution to the economic growth because of the agriculture growth. What was also happening slowly and that continued because even beyond my year after I resigned in 2018 and 19, there was also some economic growth significantly due to agriculture, because some of the investment that we had made in 2015 and 16 were come to fruition in the late years because of, for example, horticulture. It takes a couple of years for apple to tree to bear fruit, and so on. So the activity, but toward the end of 2019 and also the start of the COVID, the resources or commitment of the international community has dropped for a different reason. One, they were not in agreement with the policy and also with the programs of my successor, and they significantly reduced. For example, to give you, World Bank has stopped a number of their programs. The EFAD, which is International Fund for Agricultural Development, has stopped some of their engagement because they were not in coordination with the minister who replaced me, and due to transparency and program implementation. So there was significant reduction in donor funding, which definitely reduced the program delivery to the farmers. But also there were some other lack of management that were reported by donors. So it's not that I would be saying, but it is the report that the donors have shared, and some of the donors' reports were publicly available on their website, like the World Banks and others.
What made you decide to leave office and not continue on this path to try to reform the agricultural sector and improve these conditions? Why did you resign?
Uh, there were so many factors. One most important one was there when the leadership start micromanaging, and there were also so many hands that were not letting to be able to do my job in a transparent way, and not to be able to entertain favors that were asked by individual around the office of the president or senior advisor to the president, and I reported to the president. So I was able to the extent to stop them, but when it was too much, and 80% of my time during the last 4 months of my time in the ministry, 80% was spent on trying to address the issue that were created or challenges that were created, rather than helping the farmers, rather than delivering services. So I realized that I'm not able to work for the farmers, although I was traveling significantly to all provinces. I traveled to many remote area. My car were blown up by IED. I still was traveling. There are so many times that was attacked, but still. But once I realized that I'm not able to deliver to the farmers because of the political game that's happening, and in order to abide, to keep my name clean, because one of the things is that in order to be able to clean, you have to fight against those who are trying to ask for favors. And once you fall in that favor, then you're going deep and deep, and there's no coming back. So I realized it's time to step down, and I resigned 2 times, and the last time it was approved my resignation. The first time it was not, and the last time it was.
Was there anything in particular that changed that suddenly made all these people, turn up, or was it just an incremental growth in corruption and these issues? Or was there any particular change that led to this result?
Any particular change in the corruption? So if I can understand it correctly,
was this process of these of these people looking for favors and these corrupt networks, was it a slow process that just increased over time, or did something happen that caused this to become more of a problem?
It was very good first. During the first 2 years, that I was able to stand and not doing any favor. But toward the 3rd year I was there, there were more coordination among those who were standing, and I was left alone. Since I was given this job because of my technical or my experience, not because I belong to any political party. So I was there fighting alone. So that's why when there were so many, and when there are so many taking the word to the president back then that this guy is having issue, and then I was asked for reports in order to clear those issues, and I saw that my time is wasted in clearing the rumors. And there were a lot of rumors that, okay, for example, the certain contract process was not transparent. So I had to pull all the team, review everything myself, then report to the president that this was transparent. And later I found that one of those people who took that word or creating that problem, his company was in the process and he did not win. So they were trying to create those kind of, so there was a collective effort, and there was a coordination among those who were creating issues. So that's why it was not one individual that I had to fight, it was so many, and I was not able to fight and at the same time keep my name clean. Since I left the office in November 2017, there has not been one single issue of misuse of fund or authority during my time. So that was my challenge, to keep my name clean when I was there. In the moment I realized it's too much for me and I cannot keep my name clean, and someone will put a blame on me one way or another, and I won't have the document to defend that. That's the time I had to step down.
So what did you do after you resigned?
After I resigned, I kept busy. Well, I ran for parliament. Actually, I worked with a number of individual entrepreneurs, advising them on a pro bono basis. And then a year later, I ran for the parliament. I was close to be successful, but again, well, I would not go to there. So for some reason, number of my votes were not counted, so I did not win. I know everyone who run an election, they blame the system, so I wouldn't go there. But that was very clear. And when I saw that there were a lot of support, but the system was failed to elect the people who were really wanted to work for the people. So I continue my efforts as an individual to help with youth entrepreneurs, helping them, advising them. At the same time, I saw the issues of the poverty and other challenges, and then I had to be more engaged and start my humanitarian program. As soon as I was starting my humanitarian efforts, the COVID happened. And then I was pushed more to focus on that effort than the providing support and training for young entrepreneurs.
And tell us a little bit about your program before we kind of come to contemporary issues and what's happening right now.
What kind of program?
Can you tell us more about your program? What was it doing exactly?
Oh, the humanitarian program. With the COVID start, unlike other part of the world, Afghanistan government or donor were not able to feed people. Like in US, they at least were able to send a check so that they can buy food or provide them food stipend. There were a lot of millions of daily wage workers who were only surviving on the day when they were out to find a job. And even during the last years, 2018, 19, and 20, the poverty was increasing significantly. And with COVID, that has further deteriorated the life of millions of people. And not being able to do or find any job or feed the family. They were, so what we had to do, I started within my own family, friends, that we gather money and we bought food packages to those very poor people, particularly to those who households that were led by women who were not having any job. Those who had a job, but still because of COVID, they were not able to work. The salary was coming to them. So our target was those daily workers who were not able to have any other source of fund, and and we identified, it was heartbreaking that we were selecting because of limited resources we had between, to give you one example, we went to give food to one family and we found that their neighbor had not eaten for a couple of days. So we had to give to them priority because that family at least had bread, no other food, vegetable or rice or anything, just bread. But their neighbor did not have the bread. So we had to choose that kind of between families and individuals to feed. So that's how we start with my family, friends, and others. We provide food to thousands of people during 2020. And then in 2021, we continued that effort. In 2021, then we also look at some of the small enterprises because those small enterprises were also affected heavily because of the ban on export, not being able to export. For example, carpets was one of the items that are exported heavily from Afghanistan to other part of the world, to Europe, to US, to everywhere. And they employ the most poor people, particularly women who are weaving the carpet. So the idea, this concept was developed and presented to USAID, and USAID started through the humanitarian organization. I had to provide returnable loan to those companies to be able to survive the impact of COVID, and also create employment, and not to create employment for the general population. So that was some of the effort, in addition to provision of food, doing some humanitarian work. Like there was in early 2021, there was a flood in a number of central provinces. We tried to provide food, shelter, and other basic packages for the people who lost their houses. Thousands of people lost their houses due to flood. So those were the humanitarian efforts I was engaged with.
How did you find the people? I mean, I understand that you had to select from the ones based on the need basis, but how did you identify the applicants to begin with?
That was the easy part, because there were so many people on the street that were waiting there and for looking for a job, and they had nothing. They were going home empty-handed, and then we were going to talk with different community leaders to identify as those who are in bad need. And everyone who was, and through our social media, people were giving us name, because we were distributing food, and thousands of names were coming. But we were just not relying on the name. We had to go and see their houses. If they had when we were asking a couple of basic questions: how many people are there? Who's working? Do they have an income? So a 1 minute of basic survey, then we were deciding that the food package to be given to them or not. So that was the way, going back from area that we were able. Although the database that we had built in 2020, we had over 18,000 family in our database. We only were able to support 9,000 in 2020. And then we helped another 10, 12,000 in 2021, before August and also post-August. And still that effort is continuing. In fact, on Monday next week, we are starting to distribute food packages to 1,200 families in Kabul. So starting on Monday, and it will continue for 4 days, to be able, on a daily basis, we will be providing food packages to ultra poor family, 200-300 families every day.
And your efforts were mostly focused on Kabul area, or were they also?
No, currently our food distribution are in Kabul and areas around Kabul. Like there are a number of provinces around Kabul region. Kabul region has at least 6 provinces around that one, and also working with the local economy. We work with local economy right now to help create employment through the working capital. And that is in the region, in Herat, in Mazar, and Nangarhar, like to give you in the north, in the east, and the west regions. So we work in the other provinces as well.
What kind of how do you generate job opportunities for these people?
They are different. We have carpet weaving that is creating job for thousands of people, particularly 70% of those people are women. They're doing home-based carpet weaving. There are farmers, soybean farmers, rice farmers. There are pharmaceutical company that are creating basic medication in Afghanistan instead of importing that one. So we have Kashmira companies that are buying Kashmira from the livestock owners and then processing it and exporting it outside of Afghanistan. So there are a wide range of sectors that we are addressing. We are choosing the one that create the most job and the one that are able to show us that they are going to be able to continue their operation beyond the initial capital injection.
So after the Taliban took over the country, most of the news reporting focused either on the military and security aspects of the situation or on specific human rights abuses and kind of political repercussions of those events. But as many activists have warned everyone in the months after that happened, there were other significant problems, humanitarian problems, hunger, poverty, the fact that with Taliban not being legitimized, funds for basic things were frozen. Do we know what exactly happened this winter? How many people were affected by hunger and poverty related issues?
Um, Unfortunately, there is no accurate data, but if we rely on the UN,
Mhm.
uh, WFP, UNHCR, UNICEF, which has the most accurate data at this time, over 90% of the people were facing food scarcity. Um, to some of them reported 93%, but let's keep it to over 90%. And over 5 million of children were at the before the start of the winter were reported, but they are malnutrition and starving to death. There are no reports, I have not read that how many have died, unfortunately, because I mean the media was not very functioning, and even if it was very Kabul centric and not able to go to the remote areas, to the villages, to the other provinces. Uh, in addition to all these anger issues, there were the lack of basic health services. A lot of hospitals closed down because the government was not there to provide them the budget, the money, the salary, the doctor's salary, the nurse salary, the money for the operation. So there were no basic health services. Um, um, I have, I mean, just to give you, a lot of children die because of very basic diseases like malaria, like diarrhea. These are the diseases that are with some basic medication can be treated, or just a doctor advice sometime. And there were no doctors, there were no medications, and I don't know the number, but I know they are in thousands and thousands, just children's, let alone the adults, the women, the others. So the situation was the winter was very horrible, and it's getting even more difficult because of the food prices is increasing day by day because of what's happening in the region and beyond in the world, shortage of food everywhere, but that's impacting. And Afghanistan is not only, last year there was less snow and rain, so there is a drought also. The farmers are facing drought. So this year, currently, there is a crisis worse than it's reported. And this crisis is increasing as the winter is approaching. We, to give you example, when we are serving some family and when we go in, out of 100 family, there's 100% accuracy in terms of they are all eligible. So when we do the check, so it's very difficult to say this family is not eligible. Looking at the and hundreds of thousands of women who used to work before in one way or another, whether within the government, whether they were teachers, whether they were having small businesses, they are not, and they were mostly leading their houses. They didn't have a male in their houses, so they are not able to feed their family. So this crisis very big, and it's beyond the capacity of one or two NGO or UN. UN right now, they are doing the, I mean, based on what they report, the best they can, but they are not able to reach everyone. They are announcing and they cannot do it. They have to find partners to do it. And there's international NGOs and then national NGO, and then a lot of money goes on the security or logistic or the expatriate. So again, there's a lot that goes on overhead than actual food delivery and service or humanitarian programs.
From what I understand about major international NGOs, they generally partner with government agencies for distribution, and this is problematic in countries where you have extremists in charge of these distributions, like Yemen, like Afghanistan, you have these issues that humanitarian aid gets diverted and never reaches most of the intended recipients, or becomes, part of a patronage network of distribution and just goes to the supporters of the local authorities. Is that something that's accurate in this case?
One of the issue right now or challenges that both the national and international organizations and UNs are facing is to create a fine line on not working with the government, because there's the requirement. They should not be channeling any money, any fund to the government or providing humanitarian support to their members. Um, so that is, although the many are trying to keep that one separate, um, some are not able to create that distinction. And they are one way or another under the influence, if not uh, all of the fund or aid, but at least a portion of that aid, 20, 10, 5, 2% of that goes to the loyalists, to the government. So it would be practically impossible when you're talking about food distribution or basic humanitarian aid, to be able not to identify. You don't ask when you go to the family, you don't ask who do you support. You ask, do you have food to eat? Do you work? Regardless of their ideology, regardless of who they support. If they qualify, do they have an income? Do they have someone who has a job, or do they have they eaten? Have any other organization provided them food in the past 3 months? What was the last good meal they had, or what the stock they have in their home? So all these questions, there's no question that you want to ask is who you are loyalist to. So the question that all these organizations are asking about basic humanitarian aspect to understand the situation of the family, and based on that one to decide whether to give them the food package or other humanitarian or health services or the medications or any other thing. Then the children that fall. So yes, there's a difficult to draw a line, but the conditions of all donors and UN and most international organizations are not to work with them directly to help them, but they do have a discussion with them, dialogue, and tell them where they are going to do what work, because they need to know what they are doing in that area.
And are they able to operate freely on the ground?
They operate freely on the ground?
Are they able to do so, or
Yes. Yeah, there's based on my communication that I have on a daily basis with my team working out there, there's no issue to provide humanitarian assistance. However, when there are certain uh, information are asked, for example, which organization you belong to, what is your purpose, why you're coming here. So those information that will delay for a couple of hours to a couple of days, but that not stop the aid distribution.
Is there a coordination between these organizations, or are they just all doing their own separate effort?
There are a number of clusters that are created by UN, and the food and agriculture cluster, the non-food, which is led by one of the UN agency, FAO. The non-food items are, and refugees and IDPs are led by the UNHCR. And similarly for the governance cluster, and some other working groups are there. So most of the UNs are meeting once a month, and that cluster and also national and international organizations are member of that one. They talk, they share information, they share reports. So there are some coordination among the UN and international and most national NGOs.
You mentioned that the winter was exceptionally difficult, that there was a shortage of food. What was the impact of these factors on the agriculture? What exactly happened that caused this crisis?
last winter, or let me tell you of the last winter and also what's happening right now and the possible shortages we are facing.
Mhm.
Um, Afghanistan usually import wheat and some other crops because of the shortage they have in general.
Mhm.
Um, and and due to the lack of rain, there are two seasons. Um, in August, there's a cultivation time, and due to the lack of rain during that time, and then the in during the winter, due to the lack of snow, because the snows in the mountains of Afghanistan that is actually uh, uh, providing that support for agriculture system during the uh, summer. So due to that one, there was a shortage of wheat, and there is also when there is not enough water, the quality of wheat and also the volume of grains are reduced. So there was a significant lower production than the year before or before that one. As a result, they were more heavily involved on importing food. And when the food import was also, it was right at a time in late August that there was all banking, there was restriction on Afghanistan, the economy collapsed, the banking system were closed down, and there was no interaction between any Afghan bank or other banks in the world. So there was, for a couple of weeks, there were the issue of transferring money out of Afghanistan. I mean, it still is not possible, but the local trader find their way. There was no way to import food to Afghanistan because how to buy food, how to take money out of it to send to the suppliers.
Mhm.
So that became a crisis, and the devaluation of the Afghan currency. Before August, the $1 was equal to 75 dollar Afghani, and it jumped to 80, 90, into even 115 to 120 Fs. So it jumped very, I mean, the devaluation of Afghani currency. So everything was, and the cost of the food and the unavailability of, since the banking sector were closed, none of the traders were able to access to their capital that they had in the bank. So there was a lack of capital in the market, lack of money in the market. And those even who had money in their bank account, they were not able to take out their money to buy food as an individual or uh, as a store or businessman to order food from neighboring country. But then there was uh, some food export from usually from Pakistan, from Kazakhstan, and also Uzbekistan from the Central Asia,
Mhm.
and that came, which had some impact on the availability of food later on. So the first week of August and first 2 weeks of September, there was a serious concern, and people were starting to hoard food because they didn't know what's going to happen. Uncertainty was there, and there was a chaos actually, not only because of the collapse of the government, because of the uncertainty and people not knowing what will happen. Will they have food to eat? So that actually increased the price of commodity. For some of the product, it increased to 120% for a while. Then they reduced back. So that was the situation. Slowly, it got the prices reduced, and the market were there were more foods available because of the import. But the price of commodity did not reduce. Some of the commodity were still high because of one, the devaluation, and there was fluctuation, the devaluation of the Afghan currency, and also the lack of hard currency in the market. Uh, um, and uh, and the prices further increased this year in the past couple of weeks because of the war in Ukraine, and then the impact on that one on Kazakhstan not exporting the wheat they were exporting before, or the cooking oil that was coming from Indonesia or other countries or from um, Ukraine. So they all has an impact on Afghanistan. The challenges of Afghanistan were worse. It has become from worse to even greater. I mean, it's horrible. And this situation of the shortage of food and the impact of the lack of production in agriculture. There is not sufficient wheat and other grain production this year because of the shortage of the water in most, because of the drought. It's actually drought right now happening. So this will further put a lot of those small holders, farmers, at risk because they are not able to. In the past, they were keeping part of their harvest to eat and part to sell it. Now they, whatever they have, they will only be able to feed for themselves. There's nothing to offer in the market. So the price will further, there's a simple supply and demand. So there's not enough supply locally, so it has to be imported, and the imported price will be significantly higher than the available food uh, in the market. So it's and assuming as the price is going up and there is no employment, there is no income. So what would be the situation?
In terms of the drought, have there been any efforts to procure, by way of donors or private, private purchases of any innovative irrigation technology that would help facilitate water supply?
There are, I mean, um, a drought. Um, there are some effort, but to be able to address the issue of drought of the whole country um, in a very short time is impossible. And one scenario in order to be prepared for future is to use some water harvesting structure, to invest on water harvesting structure that will contribute to the I mean, Afghanistan is one of the countries that has impacted the most due to climate change as well, and we see that result. So there is a need for international community to invest heavily uh, uh, on on all areas that can enable Afghanistan to address this climate change impact. And one of the area is the water harvesting structure, improving irrigation system, because 45 to 49% of the available water is lost due to poor irrigation infrastructure. So if only Afghanistan be able to improve their existing irrigation infrastructure. When I say existing, it means in the 60s, there was all these systems were developed. But due to war, they were destroyed, and lack of maintenance, if they were destroyed. So if the existing irrigation infrastructure are improved, and that will help to reduce the water losses even from 45 to 20%. So that means at least 100,000 to 200,000 farmers will be able to cultivate more. Almost 300 to 400,000 hectares of more lands will be irrigated. So that definitely have a significant impact on food availability in Afghanistan. So yes, there's a need, but like I said, the focus right now, although there are some efforts on doing sustainable development, the discussion, the idea is there, but the whole aid is moving around the humanitarian aid.
Not to cry over the spilled milk, but it sounds like that during the entire 20 years of US presence in Afghanistan, that crucial irrigation-related issue was never fully resolved, it sounds like to me.
Not fully, not fully. There were significant improvement. To give you one example, and to tell you honestly, there was no development effort in the first 10 years in Afghanistan. There were ad hoc basis effort, and particularly in agriculture sectors. Post 2009, there were some efforts, and the agriculture was taken seriously. There was some investment. So if we look at the past 2 decades, post in early 2000 or 2001 or 2002, the land that were irrigated in Afghanistan were close to 1 million hectares. But in 2018, if we take the figure, it was 2.4 million hectares. So 1.4 million hectares were added during the past 20 years. And that was because there was some funding. But if there were more funding, that would have increased. I'm not saying it's entirely fault of international community. They are to great part making the decision on where the money will go because they are the donors. but also the lack of proper programming in a vision creation by the Afghan authority to give them direction and insist on that one. What is their priority? So that is also, it's equally shared. So that was when there were some vision. For example, during my time, we had a very clear 5-year strategic plan on what to do and how to, and we needed money. For example, for the irrigation, we needed $1.2 billion to be able to restore, reconstruct all those irrigation network and add more water harvesting structure. And this will enable Afghanistan to be able to be food secure, self-sufficient. Only 300 million was there for the irrigation out of the need. But even within that one, there were a significant increase in the irrigation that we were able to increase it to 2.4. Right as of before 2020, so the number of the area of land that was irrigated is 2.6 or 2.5. And just to give this comparison to 1960s, in 1960s, 3.1 million hectares of land was irrigated. In 2020, 2.6.
It sounds like there's been some progress, but now due to the current situation, whatever could have been improved is going to be stalled indefinitely until there is some resolution to the government position in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So how does this water shortage, this drought affect the situation with livestock, and not to mention the food shortages? Are the farmers able to feed livestock? Has there been a loss in livestock due to these factors?
When there's, we need water to, water is important for one is not only to have different agricultural products, but also to increase land productivity. Because to give you example of wheat, we need to irrigate that land a couple of times before we harvest it to be able to get from 1 hectare of land certain amount of wheat. So if there's less water, I'm just giving you as an example. From 1 hectare of land, we get 5 tons of wheat when there's enough sufficient water. But if there's not sufficient water, so from 1 hectare of land, we may get 1 ton or half ton. So you see that the water is necessary that increase the agriculture productivity, and also sufficient water and untimely water. One is that you cannot over irrigate it, you have to give certain amount. So that's why if there's not sufficient water or there is no water, so there is no agriculture. Depending on the amount of water, certain level of production will happen. And since there is no rain and there was not enough snow, the reason I refer to snow, that when the snows are melting during these months, so there will be more water in the streams and the farmers can irrigate their land. So when there's not enough snow, so there's no water in the streams, so the farmers cannot, and there's no rain. And that's why the crops will get insect. There was a lot of diseases that will be affecting the crops due to the lack of water. So there are so many issues that due to lack of water that will arise, lack of productivity, the diseases and other issues within the farm that impact the production of various crops.
Are there any water storage facilities or ability to import critical supplies of water from neighboring countries?
Actually, Afghanistan water is flowing to the neighboring country. And we don't have that reservoir to store them. If we are able to keep our own water, store them, we have more than, we actually will be able to earn billions of dollars annually from selling the water that is flowing to Iran, to Tajikistan, to Uzbekistan, to Pakistan, to all these. This is the water that Afghanistan that is flowing. And and we are not making, we're not gaining anything from them. We had some issue with the Iran-1 border. There was one agreement in Afghanistan history that was signed in Iran,
Mhm.
and based on, and if we enforce that one, they have to give Afghanistan billions of dollars, and we don't have the capacity to enforce them. And we had to sign more agreement because they, on the other side, has built certain reservoir which they should not. And Afghanistan doesn't have the capacity to store their water. We built the Kamal Khan Dam and the Salma Dam, and that had a huge impact on the water availability on the other side of the neighbor. So yes, we have water in the Afghanistan, but we don't have the infrastructure, or there has not been some investment to store the water, and there was no interest on the international community because of the international water issues to invest or focus on that one.
So essentially, you're facing Afghanistan is facing potentially a number of riparian rights disputes also with neighboring countries. But
Absolutely,
right now, there's no real way to do anything about it.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is among so many other issues, one of the issues that Afghanistan is facing in the region, from the region.
That's another issue that's been very little talked about. There's been, of course, discussion of border disputes, territorial disputes with Pakistan, and mediation prior to the Taliban, takeover. The attempt to resolve those disputes, but the water-related issue that really did not get a lot of attention at all. I mean, it's actually the first time I'm hearing the details of that.
Yeah, Afghanistan wanted, but because Pakistan didn't want to talk about it, there were some discussion within the World Bank that they were trying, and there was no interest from Pakistan to talk about. And we had so many issues that we didn't want to touch that one or insist on that one. Yeah, so there were some discussion whenever there were delegates. So there was that issue of water was taken off the agenda, and they were not willing to talk about it. And that's why it's never reported. And I mean, there's a lot of topics, articles on the internet available on that one, but this has never been professionally looked into by international organization to resolve that issue.
Quite frankly, I'm shocked to hear that, because this seems to be, the ability to access safe, clean water is one of the central humanitarian concerns to any country with the type of climate and type of terrain that as Afghanistan has. So I'm flabbergasted. But that is definitely something that is worth discussing further, and that I hopefully will see more written about, talked about, and raised in various fora, because most certainly that issue deserves a great deal of attention, and it's not going away. It's a long-term situation that needs to be resolved at some point.
This needs to be resolved. This is would be most important. I mean, Afghanistan water would be most important than any oil in the Middle East in terms of the revenue it could generate. Let alone the mining sector. That alone would be a good source of revenue for the country. And it's billions of barrels of water that are flowing annually to our neighboring country. We are at the center, and our highland, that mountainous terrain that we have, the water flow in all directions. So this is a very important topic for the region, for Afghanistan, and this need to be addressed, because some of our neighbors have addressed some of their issue, like the Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan has addressed their issue. That water is going from Afghanistan, so they have addressed to some extent the issue on the other side between them, but not on this side. So this is not a two between just Afghanistan and one country. It is beyond. It's a multi-countries issues that need to be set together and talk about it, and this need for the involvement of international organizations that are playing a key role in this water dispute or water that are functioning. So this is a very complicated matter and need to be dealt delicately.
Well, that's add that to the list of things that hopefully will need to be prioritized in the future. Now at least I'm getting a clear picture of many of the issues that were not well known to average Westerners, Americans, but that should have been media priorities in the past years, and perhaps things would have ended very differently had had they been. Uh, one question before kind of start wrapping up here is the current energy situation we are seeing affecting many different countries, in part due to their own decision making and in part due to geographic limitations. Have you seen any energy related issues play into the water crisis or the other humanitarian problems facing the country right now?
I mean, Afghanistan does not have 24-hour electricity. It does not have even 12 hours electricity. A lot of areas there are no electricity for days. Even Kabul sometimes does not have electricity for days. Even as today, like last year or the year before, we are exporting a lot electricity from Tajikistan, from Uzbekistan also, and also, and there were a lot of discussion and there were a number of ADB project, Asian Development Project, the CASA 2001 to export, to transit electricity and gas. Of course, TAPI is another project, the energy, from Central Asia to Afghanistan to Pakistan and to India. On one hand, Afghanistan could have was positioned in its position, and a number of activity project was underway, invested by Asian Development Bank, and also in some areas by USAID, some study were done. And at the same time, the construction of a number of dams within the country would produce enough power not only for Afghanistan, but to also to export it to Pakistan. Pakistan and even beyond that one need electricity. The Afghanistan has that resources to be able to produce not only for itself, but also to electrify Pakistan. So there's a huge potential, and there's a lot of studies done, not only by government of Afghanistan, but a number of like KfW of Germany and some other organizations, international organizations that have done, and the potential is there. It need the right investment. In addition to that one, the solar, Afghanistan has the capacity for a number of areas that they have out of 360 days, 300 days they have sun. So that is a huge, and wind powers and others. So there's a huge potential in the region to function as a transit for energy from Central Asia to South Asia, and also to produce within Afghanistan and to supply for its own population, and to export the excesses to the neighboring, particularly Pakistan, and also to partly to India. So yeah, there's a huge potential, but and there were a number of feasibility study done. A number of efforts were on the way, but very slow pace.
So there's basically a lack of essential infrastructure for these projects to be successfully implemented at the moment.
Yes, there are. I mean, it need to be. There are a lot of studies, and all these studies shows it's very feasible, it's very profitable, and thus the only issue in the past that were holding many international investors was the security. So because they were not sure how much their investment will be secure, but they knew, all of them, that it is the need, and Afghanistan has the potential to produce. And most importantly, Pakistan is in serious uh, uh, electricity crisis, both electricity and other energy crisis. And this is a big market for a lot of investors to invest their money in, knowing that the return is very good. So it is feasible, it is, but to invest in the past, it was a security an issue. Now there are so many other issues for the investors.
Mm, absolutely. No, essentially the crux of the whole problem is the government. Until
Yeah.
some solution is found, all these essential life-saving issues appear to remain unaddressed. But nevertheless, it's good to see that despite these challenges, your organization is still striving to at least um, provide skills and basic subsistence to the population. Which brings me to the question: how can the public find out more about your organization? Where can they donate if they're interested in
We have a website, zamir.co,
mhm.
where we are just posting about our food distribution. And there are people who select families to donate to them, or just provide donation. We are not posting all our activity, like working for women's and others. We don't want to talk
Sure.
more about it in the media. This is my first discussion with the media, so I have tried to focus on delivering. Uh, and anyone who would like to know more than what we are posting on our website, and we have a Twitter account, we do post regularly there, but the website shows some of our activity. So if the donors would like to check out the website, there is a way to donate. And anyone wanted to know beyond what activity we post, I would be happy to share individually about our activity, what we do for um, uh, not only for feeding the people, but for creating job, for helping the people inside Afghanistan through different means.
In terms of, you mentioned supporting families, is there a way for potential donors to kind of um, learn more about the families they're supporting? It's an effective fundraising tactic to kind of create more of a person to person kind of relationship in the process.
Um, I've not done any kind of fundraising since I was also one of the people who was evacuated from Afghanistan post August 15. So it took me a while to find my feet on the ground, to settle here in US, and then to be able to continue the effort from here, and to mobilize the team to do that one. So I've not actually done any online fundraising at all. Neither. So if anyone would be interested to help us in that aspect, to with the fundraising, to creating a campaign and to do a fundraising, we would appreciate those who have the network, the experience, and the expertise. That I don't have, and most importantly, the network in here in US.
Mhm. Um, I may have some ideas to that effect. I'll be happy to kind of discuss that offline afterwards. In the meantime, I wanted to ask you what's next? What do you see happening in the future? And is there any specific plan? And what do you let's say the issue with the government is no longer a problem for whatever reason. What do you see? What do you think the new government's priorities should be with regards to addressing some of the essential issues that you mentioned?
That would be the best day to for me to see that there is no more issue with the existing government of the international community. That means letting girls to go to school, to be able to have freedom of speech, people express their uh, concern, the media be able to report what's happening in the country, and then the for the people to be secure to go and design, program, implement, and deliver services. So that would be, I mean, once I see there is no issue, there will be a lot of actual delivery. Right now, all the development partners, the World Bank, the ADB, everyone is out of Afghanistan, and those development organizations have channeled their fund that they were used for development activity to humanitarian activity.
Mhm.
We need more development than humanitarian. This providing food is not the solution. We need job. We need to help them catch the fish, not just give them the fish.
Mhm.
So we need them to give them the skills, improve the infrastructure we talked, the irrigation, the mining sector need to be. So there's a lot of potential, the energy sector, and if the securities has improved, let encourage international investor to go and invest in the security in the energy sector, which is very profitable for the. So these are all the. I mean, this is the, if I dream these, that would be the best night of mine to be able to have this issue and to. All these issues are gone, girls are going back to school, and we be able to work more on the ground rather than from here.
I certainly hope so, and I think nothing is impossible, and I don't think things may change faster than people anticipate. Quite frankly, it's rhetoric is one thing, governance is completely different. So
I'm very optimistic. I believe um, we have seen for the past 40 years a lot of hard times. So I hope this does not continue another decade or another 4 decades. So hopefully, sooner or later, people will be able to see better days. Don't know when, but the hope is there.
I hope so. And in the meantime, what you're doing is very essential, very needed. I hope it gets a lot more attention and deserves, and a lot more goodwill from people who can provide some level of assistance to those in need. I thank you very much for the work you're doing, and I wish you the best of success in being even more effective in what you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was Assad Zamir, who was the former Minister of Agriculture in Afghanistan, and who now runs the Zamir Foundation that provides both humanitarian essential food services to the people in Afghanistan in need, as well as skills-based assistance in producing jobs, in generating jobs. And I hope I encourage everyone to check out the foundation, to ask him any questions that you have about this project, and hopefully to find a way to contribute in some meaningful way to helping on these issues that have been far too overlooked. Thank you so much to everyone who's been watching the show. Tune in next week, Tuesday night, 9 p.m. The Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. We are looking at issues that have been overlooked, poorly covered, or simply beyond the generic talking points that you hear in the mainstream media. And I hope you enjoy listening to the different perspectives that we bring to the show. Thank you so much.